So I'd like to thank my panel members here today, Tiffany, Dave, and Amanda. Thank you guys all for being here. So I think we have an amazing panel of experts. So I'm going to start off just giving you a few thoughts, and then we're going to jump into questions. And then if we have time at the end, we'll take a few questions from you all, if the panel's okay with that. How's that sound? So when I have had the amazing privilege of being able to go around the world and speak with, government leaders, education leaders, and not-for-profit leaders. And the number one thing that I hear from them, truly the number one thing I hear, which has changed over the years, is that they have a need for workforce development. They just don't have the skills that they really need in order to fulfill all the capabilities required from a mission IT perspective. And they want to know, how do we change that? How do we change that rapidly? And if you think about, Gartner says by 2020 that the global cloud sector will grow to more than $411 billion. So that's amazing, and we're already in the middle of 2019. So that means that this market is really going to grow. And for 3 years in a row now, LinkedIn has identified cloud and distributed computing as the most in-demand skill by employers. And I think AWS today is actually kind of uniquely positioned as a pioneer in cloud computing to really help the next generation of technologists to really succeed. And we got to do that in a variety of ways. Not one thing is going to just work. It's going to be multiples of things that we do together that make this really work. But we have been working now for some years with our customers and educational institutions to expand the opportunities that we're seeing and actually work programmatically on things that we can really drive. And I thought I'd give you some of the models just so that you have them in the back of your mind. But we have more than 300 digital courses. How many of you in here have taken any of the AWS digital courses? Okay, that's pretty good. Thank you. That's good. We'll continue because we keep adding them, and they're for you. And there are many topics, and most of them are actually free. And we just launched a new series of 30 courses focused on machine learning, and a new AWS Certified Machine Learning Specialty Exam, which we know everybody is interested in machine learning. And also, speaking of machine learning, Amazon also just launched its own machine learning university to train Amazonians in this fast-growing field. And one of the things that we found out at Amazon, the reason that we did this, which we want this to change, is that we found to date that there were no programs that actually taught our teams how to use machine learning the way we use machine learning. So we actually now want to take our learnings from Amazon and make those readily available to our customers and universities and schools around the world, which is kind of interesting because we've created something now called the Amazon Machine Learning Solution Lab, which pairs Amazon machine learning experts with our customers and partners to prepare, build, and train that data and put those models into production. And by the way, I met with NHS this morning, and oh my gosh, we had so many ideas on algorithms for machine learning. It was fun because it's exciting when you talk about these things. It's a lot more exciting when you put them into action on real-world capabilities that are really required. And we also host now 11 courses on edX, which is a partnership between Harvard and MIT of online MOOC to provide courses through them that are free. And there's hundreds of thousands of individuals actually going through those, including classes on SageMaker and machine learning. We also have something called AWS Academy, which supports educators and academic institutions and the next generation of cloud technologists. And less than 2 years after launch, students who've completed this curriculum have already started jobs at groups like Accenture and JP Morgan Chase. So it's really working. And to help administrators and policymakers seize the opportunities, we've been asked by government leaders, help me educate my government executives on cloud computing and what it means. So we created something called the Aws Institute about a year ago, and that's to really work with government executives and presidents of universities and individuals like this to really understand how cloud can be transformational in not only what they're doing, but in the workforce. And then we engage students directly through a program called Aws Educate, which we launched over about 2 years ago now. Maybe it'll be 3 this year at my summit, where we have 10,000 educators and hundreds of thousands of students around the world. And we've translated this multilingual so that it's opportunities for all students, because obviously there's a lot more than just speak English that want to learn about cloud computing. So we're working really hard to translate these into different languages. The other thing that I'll have to admit that I'm really excited about is last year we announced our first ever community college 2-year cloud associate's degree with Northern Virginia Community College in the U.S. And that's a 2-year degree program where you get a cloud computing certification. And now we have 2 other community colleges that have picked that up, one in Columbus, Ohio, and one in Miami-Dade, Florida. And we also have Los Angeles, 19 community colleges there that have a similar program, and they're doing that with high school students as well that they bring in. So now, and we're looking to bring that now into the UK, into other countries. We started it there so we could figure out how to make it work, and now I think we have it down, and we're really working to bring that to other locations. And then in order to really build this steady pipeline, all of these elements have to come and work together, including kind of reskilling and retraining on the job. So all these really have to work in conjunction, because how you really get better in doing this is actually having the on-the-job training. So we're doing many efforts from apprentice to cooperative programs, and you'll see us expand these, and you're going to hear about some really interesting ones today from our panel in terms of what they're actually doing. And then something else we did, we launched a program called We Power Tech, which is about diversity and inclusion in the technology work environment. So we're trying to get into underrepresented communities and really make them aware of not only just new skills, but how do they go get a job? How do they create a real career in technology? And the greatest thing about cloud computing is we're seeing these across all spectrum of jobs. So we're really excited. There's so many programs, and again, these are truly across the world, not just in the U.S. And now let's talk about today's conversation. You kind of heard from me, and I could spend the entire day telling you about all these programs with amazing examples of how we're getting good progress. But today's conversation, it's important because we have to really impact lives here in the UK, and we have to really create economic development and new jobs creation opportunities, I think, for the citizens and students here. And one just kind of last quick example I'll tell you, the Aws Educate Program, you can go through it and you can get badges. And last year on stage at my conference in Washington, D.C. in June, we had a gentleman by the name of Alfredo Colon, who is a native of Puerto Rico. And like many on that island, his job was lost during Hurricane Maria when it struck the island. And on his own, he went in and started doing these Aws Educate programs. And he had no prior cloud experience, but he soon completed more than of the 20 career pathways in Educate. Well, I'm happy to announce today that Alfredo has a job as a DevOps engineer at Universal Studios. And I love that story because I just think it's an example of going from zero to really having tenacity and grit. And he really worked to complete these pathways with no prior background. So, and there's so much more, like he's just getting started. So to think that he took these and got a job, and we're going to check in with him now here shortly and see what else he's been up to. So I hope to hear more amazing stories like that here in the UK. So now, you've heard enough from me. Let's jump into our questions because you guys, I know all 3 of these individuals, and I could talk to them all day because they have amazing stories about what they're doing. But Dave, since we have 3 women, I'm going to start with you with the first question. How about that? Which is unusual, right, that there's 3 women, but since there are, we're going to start with you. Dave, where today, from your opinion, are you seeing skills gaps in government with around cloud computing?
So that's a real big topic. I think that for me the classic of cloud engineering. I think everybody would resonate that the cloud engineering is a challenge. Solution architecture is a challenge, especially in cloud native environments. I think we have a lot of experience in traditional applications on premise, but having cloud native solution architecture, and that then draws down into how do you you do DevSecOps, how do you manage and monitor when you put that from a development environment into a full operational environment. And I think those are the kind of skills that we struggle to attract. And if you'll indulge me, and that's not for the fact that the narrative within government isn't a worthwhile thing that is something that most engineers would want to work on.
Right. And you've been really open about, when you and I talked last, you've been really open about you've had to do some really interesting things to try to get skills, which I want you to hold, because I want to come back to that, because you have done some fairly interesting things, identifying that you did have a gap and that you needed those skills. So Tiffany and Amanda, what about you all? What do you all see? I don't know, whoever wants to start.
Thank you. Yes. We're an anchor institution in East London, which means that we're one of the largest employers in the East London community, and we're really seeing very similar digital skills gaps across the piece. It's an incredibly competitive environment in London. More generally, computer science applications nationally have been going down for a number of years. Luckily, not at our university, but there's some real challenges here, and more has got to be done about raising the awareness and engagement in this particular range of fields. We all think of millennials as being really digitally savvy, tech savvy, and thinking about different opportunities and developments. But in practice, this is often in quite narrow, generally social media related fields. Yeah. And so there's some real gaps in their basic knowledge. So it's that engagement at earlier levels that I think we'll see some positive outcomes. And just one final point, if I may, is that from September, the University of East London are embedding across every single degree programme, whether this is fashion, engineering, computer science, law, business, every single one, the professional fitness and mental wealth programme that's enabling our graduates to be at a much higher level of digital proficiency with AWS, amongst others,
I love that.
As well as the competencies that are needed to succeed in an Industry 4.0 context.
And let me just ask you a quick add-on. Why do you believe that we're seeing the individuals getting into the computer science field going down from the area you're in? Why is that?
That's a very challenging question. I think it's a complex grouping. We've often seen computer science applicants to be quite uniform and not hugely diverse, not only from a gender perspective or BAME, but across the whole definition of diversity. And if we think that diversity is a precondition of creativity, and creativity is the superpower of Economy 4.0, all of a sudden there's a business case not only in terms of reaching out to get the new skills from a more diverse perspective, but actually diversity itself is creating competitive advantage. So going back to your question, I feel that is a complex matter, and we have to reach out much earlier to a more diverse audience to get them engaged and excited about careers in the tech sector, but also recognise the importance of tech skills across disciplines, across industries across the piece.
So true. Tiffany, what kind of skills gap in particular are you seeing?
Absolutely, around the cloud computing, and we as a charity, we don't pay top dollar necessarily on salary, so we tend to bring in people relatively inexperienced, train them up with AWS's help on occasion, and then they're super skilled, and then they leave for higher paid jobs. So we have a big problem with turnover.
Yeah.
The charity sector generally is a high turnover sector. But at Cancer Research UK, we're running at about 22% in my department, and that's a hell of a knowledge loss on many, many fronts. So that's a big challenge for us. I just wanted to build on something, Amanda's answer actually, because there was a time, and I'm a little bit out of date, where the computer science degrees in the UK weren't actually teaching people the things that the employers wanted their employees to do. And the pure computer science degree people were not getting jobs as they came out of university. The employment rate was around 35%, whereas something like the IT Management for Business degree was hitting 95 to 100%. So I think there's a curriculum challenge, but I'm a little bit out of date.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, we've had to work with local schools and universities to be able to build a curriculum that actually meets our needs, because it wasn't meeting what we needed from a modern technical skills perspective. It met what we needed 5 years ago. And also to pick up on your piece, one of the things that we run a STEM Ambassador and Co-Club competition for primary schools across Wales. And that's the kind of 7 to 11. And what we were seeing is there was a massive dropout. So in terms of inclusion and diversity, it was about 50-50 girls and boys in that area. And then we opened that up to the 11 to 14-year-old. And we saw that actually there is a big drop-off. And part of the reason we did that was because I think from an educational point of view, you go from it being supported within primary schools to secondary schools, it's kind of after school clubs and whether anybody wants to do something, and therefore it becomes less appealing and engaging.
Well, and in fact, you all just kind of hit the nail on the head, is why we created the NOVA Community College 2-year associate's degree. And we created Educate in our pathways because we felt the actual skills that we needed to be taught were not being taught. So we took our curriculum in and said, we'll share it and support you if you'll do a degreed program. And we started that originally through an apprentice program. So I think what we call the working backwards process is important, where we have to give the universities and programs kind of what skills we need and then help them get that curriculum. And that's really the thing that we have to target, I think, more uniquely, is making sure, because again, this kind of new world of tech, the on-the-job skills or the training that you get hands-on is, I think, really, really important. So Amanda, we're going to jump to you, and we're going to start talking about kind of we're increasingly seeing the challenge of diversity in the workforce, and just kind of simply keeping women and underrepresented communities interested in STEM fields. It's, continues to be a challenge. We think we're making progress, and then it feels like we go back maybe, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. So it's not that we're not making progress, but not as much as we want. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing at the University of East London to kind of promote or help tackle this issue?
Yes, absolutely. We've really made a significant commitment to outreach in both secondary and also in primary schools. For example, we work with a large number of East London primary schools in our Hour of Coding project, and so annually there's over 1,000 primary school students that work with us on that. We also offer those coding workshops through public libraries to the public at large. Our Inspiring Careers programme really focuses at the secondary school targeted interventions and is really aimed at a kind of more diverse population to articulate role models and different routes through careers in a different way. So through mentoring, role model engagements, career insight days. And role models are really critical. It's about it's about walking the talk. At East London, we have about 33% of our STEM academics are women, and 40% of those are in senior level positions, i.e. professoriate or readership. And they are, and it is growing, but we've got some way to go. They're really visible externally. So things like tomorrow's Engineering Week or the World Robot Competition, getting out and kind of walking the talk is really important. But clearly, lots to do, and it's really important that the most senior leadership own equality, diversity and inclusion. If the real transformation is going to take place, it has to be a key strategic priority.
It does. My team and I talk about this a lot. We actually talk about how can we do a better job with this. And one of the big things I found was you have to understand your data. Like, not understanding the data about this, like, how many individuals do you have? And also the thing that I think is so interesting is diversity is, it takes a different shape wherever you are around the world, right? Diversity in the U.S. is actually different than diversity in Europe or in the Middle East or in Australia. So you kind of have to know also what does diversity mean if you're a global and an international company, and be focused in kind of different areas of that with your teams to make sure that you're not, like you said, just talking about it, you're actually doing things about it. So Dave, this is a little bit of a different question, but I'd also like to know your thoughts just on the topic of kind of inclusion and diversity. But when you and I had chatted before, one of the big things you did bring up was the fact that it was challenging for you to find the skills, and you had to do some things locally. Can you talk a little bit about what you did locally?
Yeah, sure. So I guess it's something really for lots of public sectors to be able to do, is we kind of looked at the ecosystem, and I hate the word ecosystem, I think it's overused, but we looked at the whole ecosystem and we said, you know, in the same challenges of we get turnover, do you attract and retain? Well, if you know you have high turnover, don't be surprised when you get high turnover. And so therefore plan for it rather than it being a shock. So what we tried to do was to say we needed a talent pipeline.
Yeah.
And we tried to build that talent pipeline, like I said, right from the age of 7. So we went out into STEM ambassadors out into schools to try to stimulate the education system. Then we went into the kind of 10 to 14-year-olds. What we then did was with your support is that we ran a voice skill challenge from the 14 to 17-year-olds. Then we've done apprentices at post-college. We've done post-school, apprentices at post-college. A graduate master's in computer engineering from any STEM subject, as well as intervening that with year in industry students and computer science foundation degrees. Now, we've got way more in terms of that talent pipeline, like 40 or 50 apprentices than we can absorb. And
That's
the
a good
rationale,
thing, though.
and it's good. So
Yeah.
it's actually saying, if you look at that as an ecosystem, it's saying not everybody will work for you, but they will work in the local economy. And by bringing the skill up of the local economy, what it also then helps to do is it creates social mobility.
Yeah.
And by that gives you a richer pool from which to choose from. And it's then okay to say, if people leave for good and better jobs, then actually as a public body that taxpayers are paying for, it's a great, it's a noble thing, but also it's an acceptable thing, because eventually you get to dip back in that pool later on in their career cycle. And that's a kind of a long-term investment, rather than I want the career, I want those skills now, and you can pay for the skills now, but you won't keep the skills now.
Well, it's funny, I still hear so much from government customers in particular, but large enterprises, that they have systems that were built that no one knows anything about the code and can't run it. And that also is kind of what we don't want happening in the new world, right? In the new world of cloud, you want people to have that DevOps, that mobility, be able to walk in and out and understand that code and development cycle. Not that each and every individual is not important, but for your systems, you want systems that are set up that you have multiples of people. And we have what I call boomerangs. At AWS, you know, I tell my team all the time, I have an open door policy. If my tech people leave and they're in good standing, if they want to go, I'm like, okay, go and come back. Because that talent, you want that kind of rich talent. So I think you have a philosophy, and the one thing we have to do is create, again, more people with the skills so this becomes less of an issue. But Tiffany, you just talked about how you have this big challenge. I'd like for you to kind of address two things. One is, so you have a 22% turnover rate, you said. One is kind of how are you dealing with that? And then on the top of that, can you layer a little bit about, you know, do you worry about diversity and inclusion at all? Or you just say, I just got to take any talent I get? Or how are you kind of dealing with that in your environment when you have a high ratio of turnover like that?
So first, 22% is high, but when I joined Cancer Research UK, it was at 34%.
So it's better now.
It's better. It's the email I open most urgently every time, every month that it comes through, and I get a sense of it going down because I know how many leaving dues I'm being invited to.
Yes.
So I get a feeling for it, and we've been working really hard at making it a more enjoyable place to work to help retain the staff, and that's partly what's contributed to that. Diversity inclusion, incredibly important to me personally and to the charity. The charity sector is very white, it's very female, and in the UK quite young. I've got a very young workforce and very female. So I get the halo effect of the charity sector being female. So I have about 42% women in the technology department of Cancer Research UK and about 33% who aren't white Caucasians, and we use the word BAME to define that. And our biggest problem actually is social mobility. It's all very posh. And we've been doing a lot around that recently by changing where we advertise for graduates, by paying our interns. We're the first major charity in the UK to pay our interns.
Wow.
And those two initiatives have made a big difference. So our grad intake has gone from being totally white to being 50% BAME. And we're moving to Newham, so we'll be cozying up to Amanda, and we're moving the headquarters.
That's great. Oh, that's
we're moving the
really
headquarters there in October, and I'm hoping that we'll get some side effects there of a more diverse workforce.
That's great. Well, also, you know, I think it's interesting. I was here a couple of weeks ago, and I actually met with Amanda then, and I met with a few of the universities here, and I was really, I guess, enamored by a lot of the conversations I had was about how the universities here are trying to utilize technology to improve student life and student engagement and just kind of track their healthiness across all aspects until they graduate. But the one thing, listening to the two of you, is the opportunity that you have to like set up and do internships with each other. Like I think universities are this amazing breeding ground of talent and doing these kind of apprentice programs. And so thinking about that, I wanted to ask you all kind of about community engagement in general. And because one, you're kind of a charity, university, and a government here. We kind of have everybody, which I love on the panel. I usually don't get a not-for-profit, a government, and a university or educational, so this is kind of perfect to have. But how do you all see kind of a community engagement shape up around diversity and inclusion around tech? Do you think there's a good way to do it, something you've seen that kind of works, and when it should, you know, when you should begin it, like how early and what stages? Dave, you want to begin with this?
Yeah, I mean, so we actually sit part of the, within Swansea, we sit on what they call the Large Employers Forum. So all of the big, so that's the universities, the hospital, us as a government agency, the local council. And we try to work across a number of different issues that, that affect the whole economic area. And so therefore, where we can leverage each other in that respect, we try to do that. And I go back to, you know, it has to start as early as possible because, you know, helping our children, because they are ultimately the future of our workforce, to be positive and engaged, and to choose the right, you know, I mean, I'm going to be parochial about it. I think working in IT is pretty damn cool. Right? I've done it for a long time, and I wouldn't want to see any child denied that opportunity. So I think that getting that in early and giving them the education that you need to do that is absolutely the right way to go forward.
It's true.
We were involved recently at one of those teen tech events. They have them all over the UK regularly. They're run by Maggie Philbin, who used to be on Tomorrow's World, for those of you who remember that. And we went not just with our tech team we taught these kids some coding. We took the other scientists as well, our researchers, and then we had them extracting DNA from strawberries. It was just so cool, and they were buzzing with it. They will remember that. They were so excited, and I hope some of those will be inspired to go into tech careers.
That's a great story. Amanda?
2 weeks ago, the university led a hackathon on exactly this challenge, and we produced a whole host of creative solutions. We had leading employers there, community partners, the local council, educators, students, etc. Without doubt, this has to be a co-creation, a partnership approach. And if there's one thing I want to leave the audience with, it is very much that this isn't necessarily that digitally proficient talent aren't out there, but we have to have a really challenging look at our recruitment, search, selection processes and work in partnership to enable access to a more diverse population.
Yeah, so true. So any final thought? And then I think we might have time for one. If anybody has a burning question, we can take it.
One final thought from me. We haven't talked about disability as another form of diversity. And it was something we were very rigorous about when I worked at the BBC. And in terms of selecting software to be used by the staff, the compatibility with assistive technology was very high on our selection criteria. And I was repeatedly being told by suppliers that we were the only people making it a high priority, and sometimes the only public sector organisation they knew that was asking that question, and that really shocked me. And then I got to Cancer Research UK and I saw what they meant. We simply weren't asking that question, which we are now.
Yeah, when it's, and I don't know across the board, it'd be a good thing to look at an index on that. In the US, as an example, the Veterans Administration makes it a very high priority. And we actually consider veterans as part of an underrepresented kind of community. And we also have programs just for them. Last year in my business, we hired 15% of the individuals we hired in 2018 were veterans. And they're a unique population, and some are disabled in a variety of ways that you just have to take into consideration. But we're very proud of that, and hopefully we can do more over time. Dave?
So I want to kind of throw in a curveball here, which is for those large public sector institutions that have got a lot of staff for them, just look within. Mm-hmm. So, we have a 1,000-seat call centre, and there are lots of people in there that have got computer science degrees who haven't been given a break. So as a kind of, we talked about kind of kids, but also throw out there which says, use your existing workforce. They want to work for you, they continue to work for you, they're advocates of your organisation. Why don't you develop them?
Yeah, I think that's really smart. I just undertook something, my entire organization, which are thousands of people now across the world, we asked them to pass the cloud practitioner exam. And I think we're at 99% now. Even my executive assistant, Amanda, passed it over here. She had to study. And it's, if you look at the statistic, it tells you a cloud practitioner can make, I want to say, like $80,000 a year. It's like unbelievable. So just like doing things within your organization that are not that time consuming to let people kind of learn and understand. So one quick question. Does anybody, burning one quick question right here. Can you tell us your name and your question?
Hi. We talked about all sorts of different groups, so to stimulate diversity in the IT workplace. But what about ageism is also a big topic that is kind of an elephant in the room that no one ever talks about. So what are we doing about the aging population that might also want a chance in working with in an IT department?
Do you want to address that?
We're just starting to look at doing a returners program, and there are some organisations with very good returners program that we're talking to kind of pick their brains. And I think when it comes to some of the older workforce, it plays to Dave's point actually. Sometimes it would be easier to teach, say, business analysis skills to somebody from the finance department than to teach the business analysts how the finances work. So you can get some good cross-skilling, and that can also play to a different sort of age range as well.
So we've got a long heritage of systems within DVLA. So I would say that we have quite a diverse workforce in terms of age. And as we're evolving our services, we're putting over £1 million a year of training into our workforce to make sure that everybody, and that means everybody, gets the opportunity to be able to reskill. And the way that we do it is actually we give them access to a whole bunch of CBT, whether that's AWS, whether it's Cloud Guru, Linux Academy, CBT Nuggets, pick one. Everybody gets time allocated, at least 1 hour a week or a half a day a month, to be able to go and learn whatever it is that they're interested in, just that they continue to develop and evolve regardless of age. But but with a broad age range within our organisation. That means everybody, from the very youngest to the very oldest people.
Yes, thank you. I mean, at the University of East London, we have 18-year-olds through to 81-year-olds. It is one of the most socially inclusive institutions in London and indeed in the UK as a whole. Government's policy doesn't necessarily support lifelong learning, so this is very much about working in partnership with our industry partners to support upskilling. If we think about the young person that's just about to go into secondary school, they're going to have, without doubt, portfolio careers. That will be an Economy 4.0 norm, and therefore upskilling, retraining, rethinking about career directions will be absolutely critical for them in the future.
I want to thank our panel. They were amazing, and they are absolutely doing world-changing things within each one of their groups and agencies. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.